I'm sitting here shaping this knife handle, and as usual while doing so I am deep in thought. And I was just pondering on some of the different considerations of being a professional knife maker that you don't hear people speak about very often. And I just wanted to share those thoughts with you while I finish this knife handle up. There are a lot more factors that go into being successful as any type of craftsman than a lot of people give credence to. It would seem like the quality of the product would be 100% paramount, but that actually isn't always the case. I really learned when I was working in restaurants that the food that you serve, it's important that the food is good, but as long as the food is decent, people will show up for the good service and the good experience. And believe it or not, it seems like something that you don't necessarily do for pleasure, like buying a knife or having a kitchen table made, that would play that big of a role, but it really does. If people enjoy the experience they have buying the knife from you, if your personality comes out on your Instagram or your Facebook page and they think that you seem like a cool dude, they're definitely going to be much more likely to buy from you. So it's very important that you always are very personable, you're very kind, and you're very accommodating, especially to new people to the handmade knife arena, because they're going to have a lot of questions. There can be a lot of things that they don't know that they need to know before they make a certain decision. And so always just try to have really good customer service when you're guiding them through that process. And that brings me to my next point. So how do you guide people through this process? Well, one thing is that if you're making a commissioned piece, you're not just selling them a knife, is that you have to design it exactly the way they want it to be, and they can't necessarily tell you what that way is because they really just don't know. And you can tell because a lot of people will come to you requesting things that are completely crazy, or you know, the primary question that you need to know is, what are you going to be using this for? And they can't tell you that because they just saw that you make handmade knives and they thought, man, that's cool, I want a handmade knife. And I want it to look really sweet. That's really their only requirement most of the time. But you need to get that information out of them, because they might want a knife that looks really sweet, but they also want to be able to chop wood with it when they go camping. Or it might literally just be there to look cool and sit on a shelf, and there's nothing wrong with that. That is totally fine. But if you can't give me that information, or I don't coax it out of you, then I can't give you what you want. And so if you're not good at doing this, if you're not good at guiding people in the direction that you know they need to go when they're making decisions about the design and you know, the profile, blade thickness, things like that, then you are never going to have a happy customer, because unless you just happen to get really lucky, they're not going to get what they really want. And sometimes what they tell you will be completely out of range of what they actually want. An example of this is, I was contacted by a lady a while back. She was looking for a brisket knife for her husband. She thought that he would enjoy that for a birthday present. So I started asking her some questions about, you know, what she wanted it to be made out of and how long she wanted it to be, yada yada. And after a lot of deliberation and strange answers to questions, she determined that what she really wanted was a handmade folding knife that he could carry around with him. Of course, this is about as far from a brisket knife as you could possibly get. I don't currently have the skill set to make folding knives good enough to charge people money for. So unfortunately I had to turn her down and send her elsewhere, which sucks that I lost a client, but at the same time, at least I didn't lose a happy client, because she wasn't going to get what she really wanted. I don't know, maybe they still would have been happy with it, but not as happy as she's going to be going to someone and having a custom made folder made. So the moral of this story is always talk to your clients as much as you can about what they want, what they're going to use it for, what type of materials they like, what type of materials they don't. Are there any colors that you are specifically opposed to? Are there any colors that you specifically want? Is there a certain style that you favor? You know, are you a person who likes old-time looking things that are made out of wood, leather, and metal? Or do you like some of the more tactical looking knives, like this one I'm working on here with this black linen micarta? Those are things to think about. Now, a lot of the knives that you make for people are going to be gifts. and so you can't actually talk to the recipient, which sucks. So I have just kind of a list of questions that I like to ask that normally give me a really good idea of what that person is going to like. And yeah, some of these are kind of weird, unconventional questions that you wouldn't really imagine I would be asking people, but it's worked well for me so far. So the first question that I ask is, how do they dress? Are they trendy, or do they dress like an old man? The next question that I ask is, what do they do for a living? Of course, not only does this tell you whether or not they're going to be using this thing on the job, but it also gives you an idea of the kind of person that you're dealing with. You know, if they say, this guy is a puppy behavioral therapist, he's probably not as rough and tough a guy as a dude who's a roughneck on an oil rig. I mean, that is a generalization, but I'm willing to bet that more often than not I would be correct in the generalization. So it gives you an idea of the person's character, the kind of stuff that they're into, and also whether or not the job that they have to do is going to depend on this knife. And in addition to that, I'll ask them if they have any hobbies or activities that they do frequently that require the use of a knife. Like, do they go camping? Do they carve wood? Just anything that'll give me a good idea of what the knife is going to be used for. Another thing to think about is that you want it to be really, really convenient for them to deal with you, which means that when they send you a message, you need to get back to them immediately. The sooner you can get back to your clients or potential clients, the better. Everybody appreciates someone who is prompt, who is on the ball, and they also appreciate someone who seems like they're really motivated to do this for you, because this is the type of field where if you don't have passion for what you're doing, everything that you do is going to suck ass. You cannot fake passion for something like this and have it show through in your work. It's just not going to happen, because you absolutely cannot pretend to be an artist. It's something that you are or you are not. People know that. They are receptive to it. They pick up on it. And so it will definitely show through not only in your work, but in the number of clients that you get just in general. Luckily, that's not something with which I struggle. I'm usually more excited about making the knife than the customer is about me making it. Another consideration that I have heard spoken on somewhat frequently, but that I've never really heard someone give a decisive answer of how they handle this, is the pricing of knives. And of course, this is pretty important, because you have to find that sweet spot in between supply and demand. You have to have customers, and you have to be able to make money off of those customers. So one thing that I always encourage people to communicate to people is exactly what it's going to take for them to produce this knife. A lot of times people don't understand. They've been to Walmart, they've seen knives for $10 that look kind of cool, and they think, why are you asking for $200 for this knife that I could go get, you know, for $30 out of a Sears and Roebuck catalog or whatever. And the reason that they think that way is because they just haven't seen someone make a knife. If they sat in here and watched someone make a knife from start to finish, I'm sure that they would understand that $200 for a nice knife is not a ridiculous price at all. So I will give you a breakdown now of my history of knife pricing. When I first started, when I was first good enough to sell knives, that is, I was charging people in the ballpark of $100 to $125 for a knife, and that would be something similar to this one that I'm working on now, that you saw in my last video. This is I think it's a 6-inch blade, 4.5-inch handle, little Tonto-ish knife. It was still somewhat new. I wasn't producing knives as quickly as I am now. I'm still not producing them very quickly. I'm not a fast knife maker, probably because I insist on using hand tools so much. But anyway, I wasn't doing it to make a bunch of money. I was basically doing it to support my knife making habit. And at that price point, it is pretty much impossible to make any amount of money, even if you are a relatively quick knife maker. It's just too many hours for that amount of money. And not only that, if you're not really resourceful with getting your materials, you could spend easily $50 making just a small hunting knife. So of course that wasn't going to last forever. Once I started getting a little bit better and I realized that I could actually make knives that people were willing to pay a decent amount of money for, which was somewhat recently, I started increasing my prices. So how I went about doing this is I set up a base price for a specific type of knife. Then I would just add on things that they wanted and increase the price appropriately depending on how much extra time it took for me to do that. So I'm not going to share my actual prices with you all today, but let's say for example I was trying to get $10 an hour just for ease of calculation. And let's also say that my base price for that small full tang knife was $100, also just for ease of calculation. So if someone asked me just to make them a simple, small full tang knife with wooden scales, no liners or anything like that, I would just charge them that $100. But now let's say they asked for a brass bolster on it. So imagine that would take me an extra 2 hours. I would tack on an extra $20 of shop time for that, plus double whatever those materials were. So let's say it was $5 for the piece of brass. I charge them 10 for that. So then I would wind up with a $130 knife. And people are like, $30 to add on a bolster? That's ridiculous. I mean, if you're trying to make any amount of money, you're gonna have to do it that way, because you only have so much time that you can spend out in your shop. And a lot of these things, a lot of these processes really are time consuming. Bolsters are definitely somewhat time consuming, but going to a hidden tang handle where you have to file out a guard that has to fit up just right up against the blade, that is definitely time consuming. You should always remember that the primary thing people are really paying you for is your time and your skill. So you have to bill them for your time as well as for your skill. Now you don't necessarily have to charge as much as other makers or as much as I'm even saying for the calculations in this video, but you do have to set a price somewhere and you need to stick to it. So let's say for example you start off with relatively cheap prices like I did because you just don't feel like you're good enough to charge more than that. I think that is great. That is actually the responsible thing to do. But as you learn and grow and the knives that you make get better and better and you develop more and more notoriety, you're gonna wanna increase those prices to a point that the market will bear. If you increase your prices too much, you'll know right away because people won't be buying your blades. And I have seen some blades that were for sale, and now granted they were very, very nice, beautiful pieces, but I've seen some outrageous prices on things. And I understand that at a certain point people are going to just be paying for the name of a specific maker that they're a big fan of, or just someone who's really, really popular. But there are people out there trying to pretend like they're someone really popular when they are not. I do not suffer from such delusions. Especially because my last YouTube video currently has like 42 views or something. I'm definitely not the best known knife maker in the world, but I'm pretty new to the scene, and I've just started really selling a lot of knives probably in the past year. So how do you know when you've reached a point where it's time that you can start increasing the prices of your knives? Well, for me, that was when I had a couple clients in a row comment that I can't believe it only cost $125 for this knife. And then I was like, it should probably cost more than that, huh? Of course, you also have to take into account the type of knives that you make. If you're someone who only makes like real rough use knives, you make utility knives, machetes, things like that, they're not really, I don't know, what's the word? They don't have a high level of fit and finish. Of course, you're not going to be able to charge nearly as much for your knives as someone who makes like art knives or real high-end kitchen knives, things like that. Those always bring a pretty penny, and they should, because all that fit and finish work, it takes an immense amount of skill, attention to detail, and more so than either of those two things, it takes time. So just price your stuff according to what it is and get an honest opinion and get as many of them as you possibly can outside of your own opinion, because of course you are going to be much more proud of this piece than anyone else, and you're also going to be much more critical of that piece than anyone else because you are the one who created it. It's your baby. Take it around, show it to people, have people use knives that you make and tell you what they think about it. Give you as much constructive feedback as possible, and then use that. Don't hear someone say that your knife sucks and just get all butthurt over it. Take it to heart and think, hey, maybe my knife does suck. If you want to be good at anything, you can't let your ego get in the way. Now I want to talk about a stupid and random pet peeve that I have. This chapped my ass in the woodworking world, and it's doing the same thing in the knife making world. Calling a crappy thing that you made rustic does not make it okay that it's crappy. You can make something that looks rustic and it still has a high level of fit and finish and it's very fine work. Or you can glue some pieces of tree bark to an old chisel and call it a rustic blade. And that's really what I've seen a lot of people doing. And I don't know, people like rustic stuff. It can look really cool, but most of the time I think it just looks like you didn't finish making it. So don't make crappy knives and then use the excuse that it's a rustic style. If you want to make a rustic style, that's fine. Just do it well. And be proud of what you're doing. Take pride in it. If y'all knew me personally, you would understand how many pet peeves I have and how ardently I feel about those pet peeves. Hell, you don't even have to know me well. All it takes is just one trip to Walmart and you'll see it come out. Probably my biggest pet peeve is when people stop and have a conversation in the middle of a doorway. Oh my gosh, it drives me insane. This will be fun. Drop in the comments your worst pet peeve. That's definitely mine. Standing in a walkway or a doorway for no apparent reason while people are trying to get through and you're just standing there. But I have clearly completely digressed. Anyway, well, thank you all for stopping by and listening to me babble for a while. I was just having these thoughts while I was shaping this handle with a file, and quite honestly, they seemed a lot cooler in my head before I started shooting. So if you haven't already done so, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. And thank you for watching my video. I will see y'all next time. Have a good one.